So at the Food Recovery Project at the University of Arkansas School of Law, we produce resources and legal information designed to encourage and support businesses in developing and implementing food recovery programs. And we do this because we identified several barriers to food recovery as we were talking with both food businesses and policymakers. The first was that there was a large expectation of illegality out there in the market. People actually would tell us when we tried to get these things underway that it was against the law to give away the food that they didn't sell. And we were very happy to correct them on that point. We also really struggle with the perceptions of risk and how they were mismatched to the actual risks associated with food recovery. As Sid mentioned, you have to be real careful to make sure we prevent foodborne illness, and we control for that through safe food handling practices. But people were really concerned about engaging in an activity that wasn't necessarily revenue generating, but might increase their legal liability. And so we wanted to really help educate about those protections. And then there's always the concern about negative attention. No one wants to be in the spotlight and getting negative media coverage when they try to do something good. So we looked at both the legal risks and the reputational risks associated with food recovery, and conducted a very extensive search of case law and filings throughout the United States, and discovered that never, not once, were we able to find a case initiated where someone was sued associated with food that they had recovered and donated, and that there really wasn't any bad press out there. No one in this space could remember a negative incident, and I think that speaks in many respects to the good of humanity, and that when people are trying to do the right thing, it is unlikely that the law will get used as a sword against them. There's also the path of least resistance, which poses kind of a barrier to food recovery. It does involve a bit of planning and training and oversight to do this well and to do it within the bounds of the law. So we aim to help facilitate that by creating resources that can help you manage that process. As Sid mentioned, there is federal liability protection that operates in all 50 states. The Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act of 1996 exempts those who make good faith donations of food and grocery products to nonprofit organizations that feed the hungry from liability for injuries arising from the consumption of that donated food. And I have that linked there, the actual statute. Let me walk you through a bit of how it works, because there's a good bit of awareness that this law is there and the protection is there, but people don't often know what exactly it covers and how you can stay in the bounds of it. First of all, the exemption for liability is only for negligently caused harm. If you intentionally make someone ill, or if you act in a manner that is grossly negligent, meaning you ignore risks that you really know or should have known would make someone sick, you're not going to be covered. But if you're being responsible about it, you've put good procedures in place and you're acting according to those procedures, you'll be more in the realm of negligence if anything negative were to happen. It exempts for liability that arises from the nature, age, packaging, or condition of donated items, provided that 4 requirements are met. And the first is that what you donate needs to be either apparently wholesome food or an apparently fit grocery product. You need to donate the items in good faith with the absence of fraud or ill intent. You need to mean to be doing well. The donations need to be made to a nonprofit organization. That doesn't have to be a nonprofit organization that's like a registered 501c3. It's not tagged to the tax code, but rather an organization that is acting for a charitable purpose. And it's a nonprofit that ultimately distributes the donated items to needy individuals. Some other details. The Emerson Act also exempts for negligence liability associated with accidents that occur while gleaning or recovering food. And that premises liability piece is important because a lot of businesses are concerned about having representatives from a nonprofit or a collection agency come and onto their site and actually get that food. What if there's a slip and fall in a kitchen because the floor is wet and someone doesn't have the proper shoes on? It also exempts for that, so it's another nice layer of coverage. It also allows for partial compliance, which is to say that if there are food or grocery items that don't meet all applicable federal, state, and local standards regarding quality and labeling, you can still donate those items, provided that you go through this process of notifying the person who you're donating it to, the organization you're donating it to, about the way in which it's non-conforming. So if there's torn labels or dented cans, and if you tell them about that, and then if the nonprofit, they must need to know how to recondition the item and agree to do so. And for more information on that, there's a document called the Model Consumer Commodity Salvage Code that provides some information on reconditioning of food. So just because a food business manufactures food and it all gets slapped with the wrong labels or is in the wrong kinds of containers or doesn't have an allergen declaration on them doesn't mean that food has to end up in the landfill, which is where we get major quantities of food waste. There are ways to recondition and still stay within the bounds of this statute. I should mention that I'm moving through all of this very quickly because I want to cover a lot of ground, but I am going to share my slides afterwards and you'll be able to go through. There's additional detail on a lot of these finer legal points. So the Bill-Emerson Act was designed to create a national standard, a minimum national standard for liability protection. No state can provide you with less protection than the Bill-Emerson Act. So as long as you are designing your food recovery program to fit within its terms, you'll be safe, you'll be good. Individual states, however, can and do go further. So if you're a business, a food business, or a nonprofit working purely within one state, you may want to look to your own state's individual liability protection for food donation. You may find that they exempt even more types of liability. And it's always a balancing act between incentivizing businesses to do well and do good through this liability exemption and making sure that we don't go too far and encourage reckless or intentional kinds of bad behavior that would result in needy people becoming sick from the food they receive. Another thing to think about is that the rules of engagement vary by location. The Emerson Act does require that the food you donate comply with all federal, state, and local laws regarding quality and labeling. And so your states, your counties, and your city health departments may have particular regulations about the types of food that can and cannot be recovered. They may treat and define different terms of art, whether it's food rescue, food recovery, or food salvage, and treat those differently. They may impose requirements regarding labels placed on the types of food that you recover. So if you do have those extra hotel pans that back up a buffet line of prepared food, a particular city may require that you label those with the ingredients and make an allergen declaration. And of course, if you're operating across political boundaries and borders, you need to look at the authorities in both or all of those jurisdictions. You might also want to look out for variation regarding the treatment of out-of-date products. As many of you may know, food product dating is a kind of a big mess, an area of not a whole lot of federal regulation. The only product that actually has to have, prepared food product that has to have an expiration date indicating a lack of safety after the date at the federal level is infant formula, but various states have their own regimes regarding food product dating, and some require dates on items like dairy products or shellfish, the things that are more likely to spoil. And in the states that do that, some require or some prohibit the sale of food after those dates. Others state that you can donate but not sell the food after those dates. And still other states don't have any kind of sense around food product dating, but have some concerns about the donation of out-of-date food, and inspectors have brought up concerns around that. But as long as you, under the Emerson Act, and for federal purposes, the legislative history suggests that food product dating itself, particularly those best by dates, those inventory control and freshness dates that we find on most of our foods, are not determinative in whether an item is appropriate for donation and can be reserved. So my best advice to everyone is to develop and implement a really comprehensive food recovery plan, create a productive and proactive relationship with your local regulators and inspectors, and if you don't know where to start, contacting your local Department of Health for guidance is a good first step. In 2007, the USDA and the FDA put out comprehensive guidelines to food recovery. They're a bit hyper-technical, but they do have a lot of good information in there if you dig through them. And for more information about the liability-related legal aspects, we did produce a guide. It's been widely circulated. on the Bill Emerson Act and goes into some more detail on what I'm talking about. And then for still more super nerdy legal detail, we have a white paper that if you're working with in-house or outside counsel on this, they may want to see to kind of get into the nitty-gritty on the law. And I'm encouraged because the EPA is also working on generating some model food recovery plan documents, and I've been helping them with that. So hopefully that's something to keep your eye out. It's in product review at the moment. Just a couple of additional legal issues to be aware of beyond liability in the Emerson Act, and I'm going to hit these very, very quickly. When we can't recover food for human consumption, whether it is expired or it's been served and there's some food safety concerns because it's been exposed to larger quantities of people, it is often a great idea to try to donate that for animal feed. There are both federal laws regarding how animals can be fed with human food, and there are state laws as well. And some states actually currently ban what's called slopping, or feeding food waste to livestock. Others have permitting requirements, requirements regarding sort of boiling the food and heating it to a certain temperature. So that's something to make sure you're navigating. And we're actually working on creating some guides to that right now. The tax code, the Internal Revenue Code, provides a great benefit for those, an enhanced tax deduction associated with the donation of excess food inventory. At the moment, the extension of that has lapsed, and so it's only available currently to C corporations. But the House of Representatives passed a bill that would extend it to all corporate forms and make it a bit more generous and easy to claim. And we're doing some advocacy along with the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic right now to hopefully get the Senate to take that up in this last little session before the end of the year and make that permanent. So keep your eye on that issue because that can have substantial financial implications and be a really bottom line driver for food recovery. And then another thing to keep in mind is that states are starting to implement organic waste bans and limits. Massachusetts has been a leader in this area, and now I believe in Massachusetts, if you at a single site generate more than a ton of organic waste a month, you can no longer landfill that. And so the law in many places is starting to force people to do something better with their food waste. And so developing a robust food recovery program now is a good way to get out in front of the law. And with that, I just want to say thank you very much for including me on this panel and for taking some time to think about the legal aspects so that you can engage in food recovery and engage others in food recovery in a way that really does feel safe and provide multiple benefits with low risk.